Welcome back. This is Bettor Things with Joe Bianca. We're going to call this episode 2.5 because there's a big race coming up this Saturday. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. The 148th Kentucky Derby will be run at Churchill Downs. Hoping for good weather, clean trips, safe trips, all that. Field of 20 was drawn today, and I'm bringing in my co-host from the Writers Room and the excellent reporter for the TDN, Bill Finley, to help me handicap it. What's up, Bill?
Thank you, Joe. But the key question here is, am I an excellent handicapper as well? We'll see.
Yeah, that's what the next 20 minutes or so we're going to find out.
Right.
All right, so we'll start with the draw. The draw just happened a couple of hours ago. Obviously, 20 horses, so there's going to be a lot of shuffling going around going into that first turn. I'll ask Bill first, and then I'll give my thoughts. Were your opinions affected at all by anything from the draw?
Maybe a tiny bit, but not a lot. I mean, first of all, anytime a prominent horse draws post one, Mo Donegal, that's news. But I wouldn't have picked Mo Donegal no matter what post position he drew. But keep in mind, since they brought in that new starting gate at Churchill Downs where they can put all 20 in one gate, the one post is not nearly as bad as it used to be. As a matter of fact, someone emailed me today, said, I'm off Mo Donegal now because of the draw. And don't do that. You'll be kicking yourself if he wins. Then I think the fact that Epicenter drew the 3 post is pretty relevant as well, because that's going to force his hand a little bit from Joel Rosario. I don't think he's going to get the early lead. I actually have kind of an out-of-the-box opinion on that. I think Summer is Tomorrow, actually, who drew outside of him in the 4 post after he set the pace in the UAE Derby. I think he'll set the pace, but I can see Epicenter. I can't see Epicenter from the 3 post with speed outside of him doing anything other than either trying to take the lead or stay relatively close. So as for the rest of the draw, nobody got really nailed terribly. I mean, Zozos the 19, Ethereal Road to 20, 20 Port the 18. I never liked those kind of posts, but they were all big long shots to begin with. So yeah, I think that those were the 2 stories. Number one, Mo Donegal draws the rail, and kind of how the post positions from the inside with Epicenter play into the whole pace scenario.
Yeah, and well, you mentioned the thing about they have one gate now. That's also advantageous to horses who draw either 14 or 15, because they used to have that auxiliary gate with the last 6 stalls, and a lot of times horses breaking out of those out of the ends of the 2 gates would kind of come together, and it wasn't great to be in either of those 2 post positions. So it's a good point. I agree with you on Epicenter. Look, I think his connections probably would have preferred to be a bit further outside. Definitely outside of Messier. So now they have to send enough to make sure he doesn't get badly shuffled early, but also likely try to switch him off so he doesn't get cooked by the speed to his outside. If anyone could do that, it's Joel Rosario, so I'm not too worried about it, but he's the only horse I like a little bit less after the draw in terms of the main contenders. The one I like a little bit more is Taiba. I'll get to him in a little bit, because if he's the freak that he looks like, 12-1, which is his morning line, is going to look like a gift. But the reason I was kind of against him in this race is because he got such a good setup, such a clean trip in the Santa Anita Derby. And he just had that outside stalking trip. He was a little wide, sure, but he didn't have a straw in his path the whole way. Now I think he has a potential to have that trip again in the Derby, whereas especially for an inexperienced horse like him, if he had drawn one of those 3 or 4 inside posts, I think I would have liked him a lot less than I do with him drawing 12 outside of all the other main speeds. So I think he's the horse that benefited most from the draw amongst the main contenders.
12-1 on Taiba, that's newsworthy as well. I mean, at the end of the day, the morning line doesn't really make any difference, but that is much higher than I would have put him at. I probably would have put him about maybe 6 to 8-1, somewhere in that neighborhood. But I think it's a reflection, Joe, of kind of what is the bandwagon horse, the horse with momentum versus the horses everybody is jumping off their bandwagon. And Taiba is definitely a horse where, I'm not there, but I get the feeling everybody's kind of going against. First of all, they found out that he was put on the vets list after his first lifetime start before the Santa Anita Derby. Also, no matter what he says, and Tim Yakteen seems like a real good guy, but no matter what he says, the fact that he's only had 1 workout since the Santa Anita Derby has to trouble you a little bit. But if you like him, I'm not sure you're going to get 12-1, but maybe you will get 8 or 9-1. And at one point in time after the Santa Anita Derby, I actually thought there was some chance he could be the favorite in there. And that's how much he's cooled off, at least in public opinion.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you that he's probably going to be in the 8 or 9-1 range instead of 12-1. I think that's a touch high. But even then, like I said, if he's the freak that he looks like 8 or 9 to 1 is going to look like a big overlay if he's able to step up once again and run as good or better in the Derby as he did in the Santa Anita Derby, because his buyer is tied for the highest of any 3-year-old so far this year. His thoroughbred figure, he ran a negative -0.5 in the Santa Anita Derby. Nobody else in this field has run below a 0. So he's, figure wise, as the horse to beat. Obviously, there's a lot of variables and a lot of questions about him. But so let's segue from that into the main contenders that you think you have to use, and then we'll jump over to maybe someone who's a little bit of a shorter price that you're trying to toss maybe out of exactas or trifectas. I think the ones you have to use are Epicenter. Even with the draw, he showed his versatility in the Louisiana Derby, which I thought was so key for him. I just think visually that was the most impressive prep race of any throughout the entire season for me. So I think, at 7-2, am I rushing to bet him at the windows? No, but I think he's a horse that you definitely have to use. And with Joel Rosario in the irons, guy who never panics, even with that inside draw, I think he's going to end up being okay. As for the other top contenders, in the top tier, I would put Epicenter, Zandon, Taiba, Messier, and White Barrio. That's my tier 1. If you guys want to put those up, Epicenter, Zandon, Taiba, Messier, and White Barrio. I think those are the most likely winners in the race. They have individual question marks. I'm against one of them at least, and I'm going to get to that in the next segment. But Bill, how would you lay out your first tier of the major contenders in the race?
Yeah, mine is pretty similar to yours, Joe. And I kind of am hesitant to say what I'm about to say because from one standpoint, a handicapper in a race like this where the race is so wide open, and we'll get into it. Zandon, a 3-1 morning line favorite. I don't think he's going to be 3-1. I think he's going to be 9-2 or something like that. That's another thing in the line that I disagree with. This race is way too wide open to have a 3-1 favorite in it. But I mean, Zandon is obviously in that tier. But I want to come up with that wise guy 25, 26-1 shot in here. And, maybe between now and the time we go to the windows on Saturday, I will. But right now I'm struggling to find that. So I would say that Zandon, Messier, and Epicenter are my 3 top tier horses. I'm one less than you. I'm gonna go with the kind of anti-wise guy line of thinking. I'm gonna throw Taiba out. So those would be my top tier. But good thing I do this for free because I'm not earning my money. I think I just gave out the first 3 favorites. Oh boy, Bill, good job.
No, but that's what this is for. We want to establish the main contenders so we can talk about who we like a little bit better or who we're leaning towards tossing. You said Taiba. The horse for me that I honestly am most against of those horses is Zandon. And you said he's 3-1. I don't disagree with you. I think he'll probably be somewhere in the 4-1 to 5-1 range. So it's not as if there's a 5 or 6 horse field and a 3-5 favorite and you're trying to toss the horse and get paid. Obviously, he's got to be included somewhere on your multis and not somewhere on your tries and supers. But I just think back to we were talking to Steve Kornacki last week about the pace of the Derby and the trend towards front-running horses, or at least horses close to the pace, winning the Derby for the last decade plus since they instituted the point system. And Orb, he mentioned, was the only one really in 2013 to really come from far back. And of the main contenders, I think Zandon is going to be the furthest back of them. I think everybody else, I was looking at the Thoroughbred race shape earlier today for the race, and then, Timeform US has the race shapes as well. It really helps you envision the pace. So let me find that, because Zandon was the only one that was not going to be in the first half of the field. I think they had Messier leading early on, followed by Taiba, Simplification, Happy Jack, White Barrio, Charge It, and Cyberknife, with a gap to the next flight led by Zozos and Epicenter. You seem to think the Epicenter is going to be a bit closer. I tend to agree with that, but I don't think he's going to be up on the pace. The only horse that only leaves Zandon of the main contenders who's likely to be in the back half of the field for the first 6 furlongs. And, since they moved to that qualifying point system, it takes out a lot of the cheap speed that we used to see in the Derby, the Sinister Ministers, the keyed entries, the horses that really had no realistic chance to win the race, but served as a fly in the ointment for the other pace players. So that's the question you have to answer. If you're going to take Zandon at 3-1 or 4-1, you either have to think that he's good enough to break that recent history, or you have to think that the pace is going to be so hot that all of those other contenders who are going to be up near the pace and are going to get the jump on him are going to come back to him. What's your feeling, Bill? Do you agree with any of that? But if you don't, who else do you think might be a little bit vulnerable?
So I do and I don't. And I looked this up and did the studying of it. Since 2014, No Derby winner has been further back than third in any point of call in the race. That's obviously something that's significant. Now, it's interesting when the point system came in 2012, the first 2 years, it was horses coming from off the pace. I'll Have Another was sixth and seventh early on in his trip, and Orb came from 16th to win in 2013. But Joe, I'm keeping that in mind, but there's a couple things going here, and like I said, we don't know what the pace is going to be. I mean, it's not the type of race where you can either say definitively it's going to be a really hot pace, or you can say definitively it's going to be on the slow side. I just don't know, and we won't know until a quarter mile into the race. I don't think it's going to be something where they go to the half in 48. So if the pace is decent, and I think it will be quote unquote at least decent, that'll be fine for Shannon. And I'm a fan. I think even if he is a little bit compromised by the recent style of the winners of the Kentucky Derby, I do think he's perhaps good enough to overcome that. I mean, he's not going to be up on the top flight early on, but neither is he going to be like Zenyatta 25 lengths back, anything like that either. So that's one we'll disagree on. I'm in the Zandon camp. But I do understand you do make some valid points.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and that kind of leads into the pace scenario discussion, because like you, I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. My envision is 22-4, 23 flat for the quarter, maybe 46-1, 46-2 for the half, 110-3, 110-4 for 3/4. I think that Forbidden Kingdom coming out of the race was a big deal in terms of the Derby pace, because I just felt like he was the most headstrong of those horses who prefer to be up near the lead. Now, you do still have Classic Causeway in there. You do still have Messier in there. You got a Happy Jack. You got a couple of horses that like to be up near the pace. And Summers Tomorrow, who you mentioned, I'll toss it to you in a second about him. But I think it's going to be that moderate pace. And, if this were one of those derbies where you don't really have any faith in the horses who are going to be up near the lead or up in the second flight, then I'd be more inclined to trust Zandon at 7-2 or 4-1 or 9-2. I think that so many of the main contenders are going to be closer than him. Obviously, you got to throw him into your underneath and your tries and your supers, but just on the win end, he's the one who's going to be a short price that I think you're trying to beat. So I think Messier is going to go to the front. I just think, especially now with Forbidden Kingdom out, Messier can do what he does best: go fast early, try to keep going late. I mean, we saw in the Bob Lewis, which to me up until Epicenter and the last round of preps was clearly the most impressive 3-year-old race of the year, when he took that heat in the Bob Lewis and ended up winning off by 14 lengths with a 103 buyer. I just think with a horse who has that much natural speed, even if you think there's some other speed on paper, you go and you say, catch me if you can. But you think that there's going to be someone else in front. So how do you see the first and second flights shaping up?
Well, so I have a wise guy horse for who's going to set the pace. I wish they took betting on who's going to be in front after 3 furlongs.
Yeah.
When you get a chance, go back and look. And to prepare for this, I did my homework and I looked at all the major preps I knew we were going to be talking about. The UAE Derby, this horse looked like he was running in the fourth at Los Alamitos. And matter of fact, he got out there and the jock was just hustling him right to the lead. Matter of fact, at some point in the race, the announcer, I believe it's Terry Spargo, even said something to the effect, he'll never hold on after this. Now, they don't put up, fractional times there, so you don't know if he was going 45 or 48 or whatnot. But, and then I didn't look at his other races, but in the Racing Form comments, it all says like straight to the lead, straight to the lead, straight to the lead, et cetera. And, if you're aboard a 50-1 shot that has ample early speed, why would you not take advantage of your only chance to win this race, which would be to get out front and just hope to God nobody really goes after you? So I do think he's going to take the lead. But I think there's going to be a grouping right behind him of sort of the 3 or 4 horses that you mentioned. And, it's funny because when we were first talking about this, we were saying how there's going to be all this speed in the Derby. All the preps were being run wire to wire, and then it didn't turn out that way. I am wondering what they'll do with Messier, because I understand Forbidden Kingdom was in the race, and he's, a sprinter taken off like hell-bent for leather. But, it was notable that they did take Messier back off the pace in the Santa Anita Derby. So, I think, and you get this sometimes, there's 5 or 6 horses in here. They all want to be third early.
Yeah. I agree that there aren't as many runoff speeds. I thought, honestly, I thought Classic Causeway going in the race, much as I like Brian Lynch, I don't know, maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I just feel like he seems kind of like that cheap speed now, whereas you never would have said that. after the Sam Davis. You thought he was one of the top 5, maybe top 3 contenders in this 3-year-old crop. And now he just kind of looks like, like I said, that fly in the ointment for a horse like Messier, who has a better chance to win. But so then I kind of want to get into that and horses that you need to toss because, unless you're super rich, you can't afford to use every horse in the Derby in tries and supers. So you gotta take a stand somewhere and toss out some horses. I think there are maybe a half dozen or so horses that I feel capable, that I feel confident in tossing completely.
Mm-hmm.
And summer is tomorrow, like you said. If he does get fried up on that pace, otherwise, I think he's too slow no matter what. Happy Jack, who I think is too slow. Barber Road, I like maybe a little bit to get 3rd or 4th, but in terms of the top 2 spots, can't use them. Classic Causeway is another one, liked them much earlier in the year. I don't think he's going to see it out. Ethereal Road and Tis the Bomb. Those are my 6. Those are my main 6 tosses. How do you feel about that, Bill? Is there anybody else you would add or take out?
Yeah, no, I'm on board that pretty much the same as you. But I'll just take it a little bit further. And the one thing I'll step out on a limb a little bit on is that I'm going to toss all the Florida horses. White Abarrio, Simplification, and Charge It. And matter of fact, of the 3, I wrote after his very nice 2nd place finish in the Florida Derby about how impressed I was with Charge It. But, backing off that a little bit, I just think that the weakest preps this year, and it's unusual because these are usually the 2 strongest, were the Florida Derby and then the Arkansas Derby. I don't think you mentioned Cyberknife, who's 20-1 in the morning line. The Arkansas Derby every single year comes up tough. And this year, that whole Arkansas route to the Kentucky Derby was really weak. Unoho won the Rebel at 500-1 or whatever, made absolutely no sense whatsoever. So I'll toss the Arkansas Derby horses and I'll toss the Florida Derby horses. And then, obviously the Ethereal Road and Tawnyport and Princess Pioneer of Medina, big long shots that I don't see any reason to include them. And then another one, this isn't necessarily stepping out on a limb either, but I think Tis the Bomb is a really nice horse. Understand why, if you get the chance to run in the Derby, you do it, but he doesn't belong in this race. You can't run on the dirt. And I'm a little surprised Ken McPeak went this route because he had all these great plans to go over to England, and he would have been far from a cinch in any of those big races. But I think trying to win those races over there, like the 2000 Guineas and Epsom Derby and all that, would be a much easier task for this horse rather than going back to dirt where he just totally bombed earlier this year and trying to win there. So I'm not on Tis the Bomb.
Yeah, and I think he's the kind of horse that he's not going to be a short price, but I think he's going to be maybe in the 15 to 20-1 range. And he could be 150-1 in that race, and I wouldn't use him. So even, it's one of those things where sometimes there are long shots, and just because they're a big price doesn't necessarily mean they're good value. If you see a horse that's 30-1, that on paper should be 300-1, doesn't mean you should throw the horse in. But then who should we throw in? What long shots should we use that you think, maybe not just on the win end, but you could slide into the bottom half and exacta? I got a couple, but I want to hear yours first, Bill.
Well, I want to comment a little bit about and I'll get right to that, Joe, but I call it the Mind That Bird phenomenon. Ever since that race, have you noticed there's no longer any 150-1 shots in the Derby?
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to find the next Mind That Bird. There are horses in the Derby that should be 500-1, and they all go off at 36-1. Because everybody, and it's, amateur hour, which you understand, your Aunt Millie is betting the Derby. She doesn't bet any other race all year long. And, I want to go try to find that long shot. So, that, and if you're playing the lower price horses, that's actually an advantage to you because it does tilt the odds when the long shots are over bet.
Well, also, like we were talking about with the points schedule, it's been a formful race since they instituted that too, not just the pace. It's been very formful.
Right. So my kind of horse that is being overlooked, the 20-1 shot in the morning line, I'll give you 2. One is Smile Happy. I love this horse at the beginning of the year. And it goes back to that Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes where he whipped White Abarrio in there. And that turned out to be such a key race for him. White Abarrio and Classic Causeway. So he whipped the Florida Derby winner and the Tampa Bay Derby winner in the race. And, he keeps... he's run okay this year, but not to expectations. But I still remember what he said on our podcast, Ken McPeak. He says, and this was before the Bluegrass, but he said, I'm sitting on a keg of dynamite. I don't think he has asked this horse for his very best yet. Off his bluegrass stakes, I don't like him a bit. He had a perfect trip. Zandon, who had much worse trip than him, had no problem getting by him. But I still think this is the one horse in there. The winner of the Derby is almost always the horse that's going to improve 5 lengths off their last prep race. This is the horse I think has the best chance to improve 5 lengths off their last prep race. Excuse me. And the other one, I don't know if I'll use this horse or not. But I'll actually, Joe, I want to see your opinion on this. What do you do with Crown Pride? I wouldn't have given a Japanese horse, any chance at all in this race. Up till the Breeders' Cup, the Japanese horses, whenever they came over the U.S., just didn't do a thing. Now, all of a sudden, it's not just in the U.S. and the Breeders' Cup, but in Saudi Arabia and Dubai as well. Can't lose. So, I know his main prep was in the UAE Derby, but, what do you do with the factor of how hot these Japanese horses are? For that reason, I would probably throw them in, to clunk up and be somewhere involved if you're playing tries or supers or something.
Definitely. No, I agree. I'm in on him too. I was looking at the Thoroughgraph sheet for the Maidan races. He ran a 2.5 in the UAE Derby, which is slight cut below the top contenders, but not by a lot. Like I said, the only horse that has run a negative figure is Taiba. Everyone else is in that 1 to 2 range. So that leaves you with a lot of contenders and a lot of horses that, I like. We're going to talk about the Oaks quickly in just a second. There are more horses that I like to win this race at a big price than the Oaks. I think with the Oaks, it's going to be so hard to beat all 4 of those monsters. Like, you might be able to get some prices underneath.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there.
But in this race, there's a handful, like I said, the tier 1 horses, like the upper echelon, but it's such a small gap back to everybody else. If he hadn't drawn so poorly, I would have liked Zozos a lot more in this race, but I still think he's going to get lost on the board and be about 25 or 30 to 1. A horse that's lightly raced, kind of paired up figures last time. Obviously, he was no match for Epicenter in the Louisiana Derby, but he's had a lot of time to develop since then. I think he could be moving forward more so than Epicenter. Like you said, Crown Pride, Smile Happy. I love him as a horse just like you, and I think he's super talented and is going to have a big summer and fall no matter what happens in the Derby. Just find it hard to see him sticking out 1.25 miles. I just thought he got blown by Zandon in the stretch, and I think there are horses faster horses he's going to have to chase, and then horses like Zandon he's going to have to hold off from the back of the pack. And if this were, even the Preakness, if he could just have a smaller field, a little bit better setup going 1 mile and 3/16, I'd like him a little bit more. Going to use him underneath. I kind of agree with you with Charge It. I just, he was a good second in that race, but I didn't like the way he was weaving all over the place in the stretch. And that's kind of how I feel about the Florida horses in general. Like, that was such a stagger fest late. I do like White Barrio. I think he fits on figures. I think he's moved forward every single race. He's had that constant progression, which you like to see. But I have that vision of the Final Furlong coming home in almost 14 seconds in the Florida Derby. And I wonder about those horses seeing it out for another 1/8 of a mile in the Derby. I think Pioneer Medina is kind of interesting for the same reason that I thought Zozos was interesting. I thought he kind of jumped forward a lot in those Louisiana races, and he ran 3rd or 4th in the Risen Star, and then came back and paired up that number last time out. So I think he could have another move forward in him and get into the number at a big price. I think he's going to be upwards of 40 to 1. So I like him a little bit. Tawny Port, I gave a little bit of a look to, but this is going to be his 3rd race in 5 weeks. I know, Bill, you think that's way too much racing for a horse, and I agree with you there 100%. I think those are kind of the horses that I'll try to get a little funky with and try to get them into the tries and supers. Of the tier 2 horses, I would say the one I don't like is Mo Donegal. I just think he's going to be too far back, and especially with the rail, he's going to get shuffled so far back. He's the kind of horse that I feel like is going to be 17th or 18th early at like 8 or 9 to 1, and people are going to be ripping up those tickets. So that's where I stand. Any other thoughts on the Derby, Bill, before we move to the Oaks?
Well, are we going to pin each other down and get a pick?
You want to pick? Yeah, you want. All right.
It's funny. As we're sitting here going back and forth, I'm Messier, Zandon. All right. I gotta, I can't be so indecisive. I can't be so wishy-washy. And I know you made some valid points about him, but I'll pick Zandon. How about that? I just loved his bluegrass was of the major preps over the final ones, the 100-point races. He was the one that I said, wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I mean,
for that reason, there I go.
Yeah. I think we're both going to chalk it out here. I'm going to go with Messier. I think he'll probably be 6-1, 5-1, 6-1, something like that. He definitely won't be favored. I wanted to go with Epicenter, but the draw worried me a little bit. And I think Messier, if I can either get loose or lay off Summers tomorrow, like Bill is thinking is going to happen. I think he's the horse to beat. He's the most talented horse in the race, except for maybe Taiba, who obviously has his own concerns. I like him a little bit as well, but I'm going to take Messier. And it so much depends on the board. I mean, it's hard to pick horses on Monday when my opinion might change completely by Saturday based on the way those horses are bet. But yeah, I'll take Messi, and I hope people are prepared for the potential of former Bob Baffert tradies running 1-2 in this Derby, because I think it's got a legitimate possibility, especially if the pace kind of moderates the way I think it might.
Joe, let me give you a stat on Messier that's going to even strengthen your opinion. Bob Baffert, including Medina Spirit, well, I'm going to include him, was won the Kentucky Derby 7 times. 4 of those winners, 4, including Authentic and Medina Spirit, it was the weird year with Authentic, so I'll just put it this way. 4 of them ran second in the Santa Anita Derby. So 4 of his 7 Kentucky Derby winners ran second in the Santa Anita Derby. Now, I know the name on the program says Tim Yaktine, and I'm not saying it's he's I'm sure he's in there doing a good job and everything, but I still consider these Bob Baffert horses. I mean, he's had them 98% of their career, and laid the foundation to get there. So I think if you're a big fan of Baffert in the Derby, and how could you not be, I think you have to like Messier and probably Taiba as well.
Yep, definitely both going to be A's on my tickets. We didn't really talk about the multi-race bets because it's hard to figure out how those are going to shake out until you see all the undercard races. But I think that, those would be my A's, along with, I guess I'd throw in Whiter Barrio as an A, as well as Epicenter, and then Zandon probably like a B or a C. So let's just talk briefly about the Oaks. I wouldn't normally do this on a Kentucky Derby preview show, but it's such a great race. It's the best Kentucky Oaks I can remember. I'm honestly surprised that it drew 14 horses. I said this earlier on the Writers Room that I thought this might be an undersubscribed Oaks, because it doesn't always get 14 horses. I thought it might get 9 or 10, but God bless people who were willing to take a shot, even though we have these 4 major contenders in this race. And obviously the major contenders, Echo Zulu, Nest, Kathleen O, and then who's the 4th one, Bill? I'm forgetting.
Secret Oath.
Secret Oath, of course. I was still thinking about her maybe running in the Derby. I'll just break it down like this. I don't think you're going to beat any of these 4 horses on top. I think, you use those 4 in the pick 4s and the pick 5s. You're going to be safe going through that race. The idea is probably to get somebody else underneath for the try. Maybe the exacta if a couple of these fillies don't show up. I was against Echo Zulu going into this race because I think on paper she's the slowest of these 4 major contenders, which says a lot about the quality of the field, considering she's a champion. She's an undefeated champion, and she's probably the slowest of the top 4 contenders. But I think the pace isn't going to be that fast. I kind of think that she's going to be loose on the lead. I think that hurts Kathleen O a little bit. But the horse that I cannot get past, and the horses whose race I cannot forget, was Nest in the Ashland. I just thought of all of these really, really impressive races by the 3-year-old fillies in the last month or two. She just looks so good. Arad Ortiz was sitting on a keg of dynamite, to use Kenny McPeak's expression, that whole way, went wide around both turns. It didn't matter. She exploded away in the stretch and just won in an absolute canter. I don't care what was in the race behind her. Just visually, I thought that was the best race of any filly this year. Bill, how do you look at the Oaks?
All right, I'm going to reserve the right to not make my pick till Friday. A couple things, and you're right. These are 4 beasts. These 4 horses. I mean, absolute beasts. Any one of the 4 in a normal year could be a 2-1, 8-5 favorite in the Kentucky Oaks. And now, I totally disagree with the line maker there, but Secret Oath 6-1. But that does speak to the strength of the race. So, a couple of thoughts. I am like you. I'm not on Echo Zulu. I did not like her return to the races, where she won by a nose as a huge favorite, ran the slowest Beyer figure of her career as a 3-year-old versus her 2-year-old numbers. Can she move up off that race? Of course she can, but that was to me not a good starting point. The way she was really eked out the victory and didn't get a big figure. And then I would have 2 weeks ago I would have said that I would be loading up on Kathleen O because I love that horse. But I do listen to what the clockers and the experts have to say, and I think you have to. And everybody was panning her workout the other day, and that's relevant. It really was. I mean, the last thing you would think was that a horse trained by Shug McGahee wouldn't be sharp and ready for the biggest race and start of her career. But, if it's just one guy saying it, and it's like, okay, but everybody said it was a lousy workout, and so everybody's going to jump off their bandwagon. So that leaves me with Nest, I suppose, and Secret Oath, and we'll see. I don't think Secret Oath is going to be 6-1 though. That's very high.
Yeah, unless people are totally off of her because of the Arkansas Derby. But if you go watch that race, she ran great. I don't care what the figure says. I don't care where she finished. She ran a big race in that day against males. Yeah, if you want, XBTV sponsors the Writers Room. You can go Google. You can go search all those workouts for those contenders, and you can judge for yourself whether or not you thought Kathleen O's work was great or terrible, as people are saying. So that's what's nice is like we got a lot of new technology, a lot of new streaming services that we can look at the works for ourselves. But yeah, I'm sticking with Nest on top. She would be my key horse. In terms of just a couple of long shots I might throw in underneath to try to spice up the tries. I think it's going to be hard to get these horses in the exacta, but I like Venti Valentine a little bit. I think her race 2 back was big. She's going to be forgotten a little bit after her last race wasn't very good. Hidden Connection, who our co-host Jon Green likes a lot. I think that she's rounding in the top form. Desert Dawn and Goddess of Fire. Now, Goddess of Fire is tough to take because she just got smacked by Kathleen O. But if you think that Kathleen O isn't going to run her good race, maybe she could sneak into the try as well. So it's going to be a great weekend of racing, and it's one of those. We talked about this before, but this needs twin billing. Usually the Oaks is kind of the lead up to the Derby, the appetizer. But this year the Oaks and the Derby should be on equal footing on the marquee, and we're very much looking forward to it. Bill Finley, thanks for coming on and talking to me.
Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all for watching. This is Bettor Things episode 2.5. I think we'll be back with episode 3 fairly soon. And best of luck with all your Derby bets and your Oaks bets. It's going to be a tremendous weekend. And thanks again for tuning in.